There are huge benefits of using AI. It is a general purpose technology in the same way that the internet is. The internet itself is not good or bad. It is a platform on which good and bad things are built. It is the same with artificial intelligence and generative AI in particular. So yeah, it can be used for terrible things. It can also be used for amazing things. And it's up to us to educate ourselves on it and to make sure that it's being used for the right things. This is why I do a lot of education and helping everyday people learn how to use AI, because it should not just be the corporations. It should not just be people in San Francisco who are taking advantage of this technology. It should be for everyone because it has the potential to democratize access to education and to support in a way that no technology has before. Welcome, this is AI with Kyle. I'm going to be running through the day's updates in the world of artificial intelligence. It is hard to keep up with what is going on a daily basis, so I do this live show to give my thoughts, to bring you what I think is important, and to try to screen out the noise because there is an awful lot of it. So we have a couple of news articles that we're going to be covering today. I'm also going to be taking questions from the live stream as well. So I will alternate between doing a news article and answering some questions. If you want to find a summary of everything that's going to be covered here, it's going to be on YouTube. That's where we clean everything up, we clip it, and we put it into individual videos. There is also a newsletter which comes out every single day, which has the past lives information, again, broken up into segments. You can find the exact information that you want to find without necessarily having to watch through the whole live. The advantage of being on the live is you can ask questions and I'm able to answer them in real time. Okay, so with that, let's hop straight into some news. So last week, was it last week? Yeah, it was last week. I'm losing track of time. ChatGPT, they used an internal model to get a gold medal in the International Math Olympiad. It hurts me to say math instead of maths, but there we go. So Google have immediately followed up and also done the same. So just a week later, so an advanced version of Gemini with DeepThink officially achieves gold medal standard at the International Mathematical Olympiad. So they did it a week later. This is a bit like, oh my goodness, what's his name? Bannister, the first person to run a 4-minute mile. It feels a bit like that when one person manages to do it, everyone else will come flooding in and be able to do it. It will become a trivial task. So last week, this was big news that ChatGPT had achieved this gold medal in the Olympiad. Now, a few days later, we have seen Google do the same. And I imagine we'll have Anthropic and Grok and all the other models passing the same test in a relatively short amount of time. What's interesting about this is that the ChatGPT attempt was relatively unofficial. I think they did it, I'm not sure of the exact officiality, but they did it outside of the normal boundaries of the IMO. And so it managed to pass, but it wasn't officially sanctioned. Whereas it looks like, here we go, it looks like Google have done it properly. I'm just trying to find where it is. So Google has earned 35 out of a possible 42 points, which is a gold medal solution. And it's using the new DeepThink mode. This is, again, it's an internal model. So the same with ChatGPT's attempt or success last week. It is something that is not yet available to the general public, but being tested internally. So we don't actually have the ability to test this ourselves. I don't think they're lying. I just think that does introduce the potential for overfitting the model potentially. And we won't really know until we have these models in our own hands. But either way, it's a large and very substantial push in the right direction, because previously large language models were that they were language models. What's happening now is we're seeing the use of language, which is what large language models are trained on, that allows us to push further and further into reasoning. We're still reasoning using language, but that is now allowing us to move to outside of language into mathematics. A frequent criticism of large language models were things like how many R's are there in strawberry, which is a computational question. It is about counting. We have machines that are really good at computation. They are called computers. We've had them for a long time, but this was always a criticism that was levied at generative AI and large language models is, oh, they can't even do 2 plus 2. That was because they were not built to do that, because we have computers already. We did not need to build a new system to do 2 plus 2. That is a trivial problem. What we're seeing now, though, is these new advanced models from ChatGPT and now from Google they are able to reason at such a level using natural language that they can solve complicated mathematical problems. And again, the ChatGPT attempt the other day was done without external tools. So it was not allowed to call to Python, for example, to do calculations. That will be the same. I haven't read it explicitly, but that will be the same with the Gemini model because you're not allowed to use external tools when you do the International Math Olympiad. So they will be making a version of DeepThink, this new Gemini mode model, available to a set of trusted testers, including mathematicians. Makes sense, before rolling it out to Google AI Ultra subscribers. So giving it to mathematicians makes sense because, let's be honest, the majority of us won't be able to even test whether this is a good model because our level of mathematical knowledge and ability and kind of discernment is not high enough. This is increasingly becoming a problem with very high-end models where the normal person, the lay person, the everyday person in the street who is using the new version of ChatGPT, we don't have complicated enough problems for these models to solve. So it's very hard for us to tell whether they're getting better or not in certain areas. So it looks like Google are rolling it out to mathematicians because they'll actually know whether it's a good model or not. Whereas for the rest of us, if we're trying to calculate how much flour I need for a cake recipe, I do not need something of this caliber. It is complete overkill. So exciting news and really cool to see that Google have immediately caught up with ChatGPT. What that tells me was they were probably ready to pull the trigger and do this test publicly a few weeks ago, but then ChatGPT came out, did it, and then there's been a rush at Google over the weekend. We need to do it now. We need to also publish our results. So they were picked to the post slightly by OpenAI, but at least they are at the same level. So very cool. So the next one is less of a news article, but more something that I thought was very interesting. And again, talking about Google, we've just had a positive Google news story. This is a potentially negative one. Google's former VP of AI, Mustafa Suleyman, was on ChatGPT's podcast. So ChatGPT is a creator primarily on Instagram and TikTok. Does really good stuff. Very good at explaining why AI is important. You should definitely follow her. She had on her podcast, here we go, speaking on the ChatGPT podcast, she had Mustafa Suleyman, who is a co-founder of DeepMind and Inflection AI. So that's quite a get for a podcast guest. So on the conversation, he talked about a product Google had called Lambda. And Lambda was quite a while ago. I don't know the exact dates, but it was before ChatGPT. Absolutely. And he talked about Lambda as genuinely like ChatGPT before ChatGPT, but they did not push it. They did not get it out into the world because they were concerned of the existential threat that it posed to Google's own search business. Now, this is something if you watch any of my stuff or you read any of my work, I go on about all the time, how Google are in big trouble. About 80% of Google's revenue comes from search. So specifically when you or I go onto Google and we search something, they serve up adverts at the top. So they're not charging their users for the money. So when everyday people use it, we use it for free. Because we're using it for free, we are the product. We are what they are selling to advertisers. They are selling our eyeballs and our attention, not physically our eyeballs, or I hope not. That would be a very strange twist in their business model. Hopefully they won't get that desperate. 80% of their revenue comes from that. It doesn't come from telephones. It doesn't come from Gmail. Gmail was like a cool thing that was created in their extra day of work. It was a side project. It doesn't come from any of those business areas. It comes from search. That is their core business, is indexing and cataloging the world's information via Google search. And that includes YouTube. YouTube is basically the second largest search engine, but it just serves up video content. So they make all of their money from that. Artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence, is a huge threat to that because Gen AI is trained on all of the information that is already out there. And it means we do not need to search for information because Gen AI can basically create that information by digging into its training for us. So you've probably seen already on Google, they've added the AI overviews at the top. This is kind of them trying to have their cake and eat it because they make their money from everything that is below it. But even they have realized that the new way of accessing information is not searching through websites. It's not going to Google, finding a website, clicking on the website, reading through the information, realizing it's trash information or it's full of adverts or whatever, going to another website, trying to find that information elsewhere. We spend a lot of time searching for information online because there's a huge amount of it. Gen AI cuts through all of that. Yes, it's got things wrong. Famously, with AI overviews of Google, it was telling people to eat rocks and eat glue and stuff like that. But this is where we are heading. So previously, we used to have to remember all information. That became impossible. So we started to write it down. And then we had things like encyclopedias. Remember Encyclopedia Britannica? Then we moved to things like Encarta, which was, gosh, that makes me sound old, doesn't it? Encarta, which was a CD version of Encyclopedia Britannica, which I think Microsoft released. I think it was Microsoft. And it had all the content of Encyclopedia Britannica on discs, basically, so you went from a bookshelf full of information down to a few CDs. And that at the time was like, oh my God, amazing. And then Encarta stopped being relevant because we had the internet. We would use the internet to find information. So we've always had changing paradigms of how we access information. The newest one is generative AI. It's using AI to find and synthesize information. That is an existential threat to Google, because as long as if we're doing that, we are not going to be searching for it, and Google's 80% of their revenue collapses to zero, and Google will cease to exist. So this is why on this conversation with Mustafa Suleiman, he basically admitted, yeah, we had something like ChatGPT before ChatGPT. We did not put it out into the world because it would have harmed our search business. They knew upfront many years ago what a disaster this would be for Google. The thing is, this reminds me of the famous example. You can't avoid it if you go and get an MBA like I have. The famous example is Kodak. So Kodak I think they formed in like the 19th century. They've been around for a long time. And they created film. Film was their main product. So film for cameras and film cameras, excuse me. So they'd done this for nearly 100 years or so. It was one of their researchers who actually worked out digital photography and realized early on, oh, okay, wow, we could do this digitally. We don't actually need to use all these chemicals. We don't need to use celluloid and these physical materials. We can do this digitally. And this guy went up to the head of Kodak and he's like, hey, we should be doing this. We could save so much money. People could take so many more photos. They wouldn't have to buy film, etc. And Kodak shut him down. They said, absolutely not. Because Kodak realized digital photography was a threat to their main business, which was creating film. They'd already created factories, hundreds of factories across the globe. They were one of the biggest purchasers of chemicals, the chemicals used in film production. All of that would have been at risk if digital cameras became a reality. So despite it being their researchers who worked out digital photography early on, Kodak sat on it and they said, nope, we are not touching digital photography. And then later, other companies obviously came into the digital space, and Kodak was always the one who, in their marketing and in their messaging, all they talked about was how superior film was to digital and how superior and how real photographers should use film. They shouldn't be using digital. So they were always on the back foot, always on the defensive. That's the risk for Google here. I think, though, what Google are trying to do is have their cake and eat it. They are trying to maintain their search business, but they're placing AI overviews over the top. Already, website owners are seeing drops in traffic because people are not going to the website. People are going to the AI overviews, getting the information and leaving Google. At the moment, Google don't make money from that. They will probably add adverts into AI overviews, or maybe they have already. I don't think they have, but I'm sure they will because they need to make money. What this means, though, is this disincentivizes me as a website owner from creating new information. Why would I write a blog or publish recipes or create an affiliate marketing site and put information onto the internet if Google is not going to send traffic to my website? I will not make money. There is no incentive for me to do. So you start to see a crash out in the number of new websites being created, the content being put online. And this in turn means that it's less likely that people are going to be going to Google at all to find information, and Google will still sink down. This is not just Google's fault. It's just they happen to be the people who are the gatekeepers to the information on the internet. And that information is now transitioning from search as a paradigm of accessing the information to generative AI. So Google are in an unenviable position. I was actually at Google, got a little thing here, my security pass. I was at Google 2 days ago. I did not say any of this because I'm sure they all know this and it's a bit of a concern. So I kept stum. Well, I hope they know it. I'm not sure if all their staff members realize, but yeah, I think Google is in trouble. And this article in this podcast with ChatGPT suggests that they know that generative AI is an existential threat, which is why they sat on Lambda and they did not grab this technology. And instead, they allowed OpenAI and ChatGPT to become the leader in this particular space. So it is what it is. It's a bit sad. It's hard to imagine a world without Google, but I think in the next 20 years, we'll be asking young people, or we'll mention Google, and young people will be like, wow, what's that? That's a stupid name for a company. What the hell is Google? Which seems crazy to us right now, but I don't think it's unlikely. I'm going to hop over to questions because I see some now. Uzi is saying search engines definitely becoming tech of the past. Yeah. How would websites handle AI? So it is becoming a tech of the past because the paradigm for how we access information is shifting. So it's a huge shift. It's not Google in particular. It's just humanity as a whole are starting to get information in a different way, in the same way that there used to be all storytellers, then books, encyclopedias, etc. We're just shifting to the next level. That's all. So it's not Google specifically. It's just a human-wide shift. So you're asking how would websites handle AI, so agents and bots? So right now, they are blocking them. They are disallowing scraping, they're disallowing access to bots. The reason is if you are a website owner, you want people to be coming to your website, and bots and AI agents, all of these kind of things are a threat because they will potentially circumnavigate your website in some way. So a lot of them right now are updating their robots TXT to disallow agent access. I think this is a bit like Google releasing AI overviews. This is a stopgap measure. The fact that we are sending agents and bots to websites in the first place is also a temporary solution. It's just because that is where the information is right now. We will eventually just have AIs talking to AIs. We won't need to go through websites as an interface. The idea of not having websites, again, it feels weird because that's how we've had the internet for the last couple of decades. But interestingly, over in China, a lot of businesses don't have websites. They have a mini app on, I was about to say WhatsApp, not WhatsApp, WeChat. So WeChat or Weixin is the all-in-one universal app in China. So I used to live in Beijing, and you can use it for everything. You can pay your council tax, you can order taxis, you can order bouquets of flowers, you can book restaurants, hotels, etc. It's all done through an application. The companies have mini apps, which is like a web page, but it's not accessible outside of the app. So that is an example of a different way to do it, where in China, a lot of businesses, a lot of the internet just skipped over websites to whatever the next thing was, which in their case was applications instead. So I think that's where we are going. Websites will become something that it's something of the past. The idea of putting a piece of information up in a certain place and having a URL for it, that doesn't necessarily need to remain what we do. And instead, we'll have agents talking to agents. Quite what that looks like, I'm not smart enough to answer. I'm sure people are working on this problem. But in the meantime, we will have these heritage technologies in place, and we will just use our agentic systems on top. So we'll send agents to websites, for example. But lots of websites and publishers are trying to block that because, again, it's a threat. Scarf is saying, literally not a single good use for AI. Dangers outweigh any good, and it kills the soul. Not a single good use of AI. So I disagree. Obviously, I'm doing a live about artificial intelligence. I'm seeing a lot of people doing a lot of good work with artificial intelligence. I personally do pro bono workshops with refugee and asylum seeking charities here because we can use AI to help non-native English speakers to make their lives a lot easier. So I work with asylum seeking mothers who have kids, and they have but they still need to do things like write to the Home Office, which, if you are a Kurdish speaker, for example, is really difficult. How do you read all of the documentation the Home Office has sent you? How do you prepare an application for your asylum? How do you live in a country where you don't speak the language, you don't know the culture, you've had to flee from war and persecution? ChatGPT and artificial intelligence can really help here, and it can help people who, not just tech bros, but people who are disadvantaged, people who need some additional help. ChatGPT and other AIs give people access to basically a personal assistant. We're seeing also things like tutoring. So when AI is used well with kids, it can be used to tutor. So there was a study in Nigeria, I think it went on for 6 months, and they gave kids in Nigeria access to an after-school tutor. It was supervised, so the teacher was still in the room. But in 6 months, the kids managed to cover 2 years worth of curriculum using this AI tutor, because they were basically given a one-to-one tutor who knew what they knew and was able to help them push forward. A one-to-one tutor is generally only something that is available to rich kids. Not anymore. It is available to pretty much everyone. So there are huge benefits of using AI. You just need to be imaginative and work out the best ways to use it. It is a general purpose technology in the same way that the internet is. The internet itself is not good or bad. It is a platform on which good and bad things are built. It is the same with artificial intelligence and generative AI in particular. So yeah, it can be used for terrible things. It can also be used for amazing things. And it's up to us to educate ourselves on it and to make sure that it's being used for the right things. This is why I do a lot of education and helping everyday people learn how to use AI, because it should not just be the corporations. It should not just be people in San Francisco. It should not just be white dudes. I say this as a white guy myself, who are taking advantage of this technology. It should be for everyone, because it has the potential to democratize access to education and to support in a way that no technology has before. So if you think it has no good uses, you're probably not thinking about it hard enough. No offense, a little bit. Jason says the companies are thinking about putting ads in responses. Yeah, Jason. So this is coming back to Google, the AI overviews. So AI overviews take information from Google and put it at the top and make it instantly accessible, which stops people clicking on the websites, which is a disaster for the website owners. But it allows Google to stay relevant because people are still using Google for now. And right now, they're not adding adverts into it, but 100% they're going to start to add sponsored listings into AI overviews. Let me check that, because maybe they already are. I might be wrong on this. Yep, okay, they are adding adverts. Of course they are. So Jason has said they're already thinking about putting ads in responses. Yeah, 100%. So they are doing it. I know that Bing, which is Microsoft search engine. Yeah, search engine. God, I was about to call it a browser. It shows how much I use it. Do you know they spent millions coming up with the name Bing because they needed a good name so they could combat Google, which is hard because Google owns, God, I think it's 90% of Western search traffic. So they spent millions coming up with this name Bing. And the first day they released it, some wisecrack online, probably on Reddit, realized that it's an acronym of "but it's not Google." So these poor marketing people had spent months and millions coming up with the name, and then one person in one day was like, "Oh, no, it's not going to work." Anyway, that's a side point. So they are adding ads into AI overviews. This was from May 2025. Shopping ads in particular. Okay, so I know ChatGPT do this as well. I was recently buying, can't see it, but a guitar up here, and I wanted to buy a new 7-string guitar. And I was chatting to ChatGPT about what are the best 7-string guitars within a certain budget for a certain type of music, blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't just giving me suggestions, it was giving me links for where I could buy them. So they will get a cut on that. They'll get an affiliate fee on that. And they will also, I imagine, start to do sponsored posts later. Bing also tried this out early days with, it wasn't Gemini back then, it was called Bard, which was Google's AI. Sorry, Microsoft's AI. Even I get mixed up. There's so many of them flying around. And it was very unpopular. But I think what we're seeing now is because all of the AI companies need to make money, they need to put some revenue in, they're going to be moving towards these sponsored searches. How transparent they'll be is still to be seen. This is actually, funnily enough, this is how Yahoo died. This is how Google killed Yahoo, because Yahoo got greedy. Yahoo started to put promoted listings at the top. So you could pay to get to the top of Yahoo, but Yahoo would not disclose that it was a paid for listing. So what was happening was trash and sales pages were reaching the top because they'd paid. People were clicking through to it and they're like, oh, it's trying to sell me something. This is nonsense. So people lost faith in Yahoo. And at the same time, Google turned up and they said, no, we would never do that to you. We'll always be very clear in our labeling. And they were initially. Early days, Google, the advertised listing, it had a big yellow box around it, said advert. It looked totally different. They've become more and more subtle over the years. So now it's like a little kind of gray, it says ad in gray letters on white text, and it looks more and more like the organic listing. So the balance here will be, you want to provide a strong generative AI response, something that's genuinely useful, and then have sponsored listings that are obvious enough so that you don't lose trust with your users, but at the same time, subtle enough that people will still click on those and buy them. Because this kind of online advertising and AdWords and stuff, it is a little bit about tricking people. Google will never say this, but it is about, they'll say it's about providing a valuable paid alternative at the top of the page or whatever, but no, it's about tricking people. Let's be honest. So that's going to be the balance for generative AI companies right now. And I'm sure it'll become the norm, and they'll all add adverts into their listings. So Uzi saying Philips on MP3. Yes, perfect. So there are so many examples. We were talking earlier about Google produced Lambda, and they did not release Lambda, which was like ChatGPT before ChatGPT, because they were fearful of their search business. And I gave the other example of Kodak, and then a researcher at Kodak creating the digital camera, or coming up with the idea. And Uzi saying Philips on MP3. Yeah, Philips came up with the MP3 standard, but because they built CD players and cassette decks and stuff like that, there's no way they wanted a digital format out in the world like that. So they sat on the technology for as long as they humanly could. It happens again and again with large corporations because they have the research teams. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of people working on technologies in this space, but they are also the ones with the most risk, the most to lose if they release these technologies. So lots of them will come up with the technology, patent it, and then sit on it, making sure no one else can use it. Yeah, yay corporations. I'm just going to scroll down. Jason saying, Google isn't going to die. They've pivoted pretty well recently. Yep, I agree. They have so to AI models. Yes, they're pushing into AI aggressively because they know the writing's on the wall for the search business. The question is whether they can replace the search revenue with AI, because it's 80% of their revenue, which is a huge amount of money. A huge amount of money, because Google is a massive business. So the question is whether they are able to replace that with the revenues from artificial intelligence. For example, let's see what OpenAI's revenues are. Apparently, OpenAI's revenue is 10 billion. Google, let's look at the Google search revenue. Yeah, so last year, Google search revenue was 200 billion. So this is the shortfall, the gap that they need to make up. They're making 200 billion from search and another 40 billion from YouTube adverts. Okay, so let's say 200 billion revenue from search. Right now, OpenAI, which is arguably it's a larger AI company, it has more users of their AI products. They doubled their revenue this year to 10 billion. So they went from 5 billion to 10 billion. So that's still, what did I just say it was? 200. So that's still 20 times less than the revenue that Google makes from search. So the question here is, okay, yeah, Google have really good products. They just won the Math Olympiad. They're doing great things in AI. 100% agree. They are 20 times off, or 2000% off the revenue target they'd need to hit to replace Google search. So maybe they can do it. I don't know. And then how much of that is profit as well, especially if you were building lots of data centers, very expensive data centers, then that's also going to squeeze that revenue down. So the profit of it's going to be much lower than search, which is, I think search revenue is very high margin. Let me look it up there. Google search. Okay, so Alphabet's average net profit is 27%, which is pretty good. I don't know. Here we go. So Google's core business, which is search, runs on a 75% margin, apparently. Whew. That's not going to be the same with AI. And so I think this is their big problem right now is we need to replace 200 sorry, 200 million in revenue. 200 million or billions? Are we in the, no, 75% is from advertising. So it's billions. Gosh, the numbers are so big. So they need to replace 200 billion in revenue. They're probably making 5 billion from their AI products. Maybe I'd have to do the research into that. So how are they going to make up that shortfall? And will that revenue be at a similar profit margin? Probably not, because search is at 75% profit margin. This is why I'm quite bearish on Google, and I think they may be in trouble, but we'll see. Tony Do says, do you think OpenAI will allow businesses to add their business information, etc., similar to China? Not sure. So right now, because their partnership with Microsoft, a lot of the information that they're scraping comes through Bing Webmaster Tools rather than Google Webmaster Tools, because they are competing ecosystems. To get your SEO or your AIEO or your GEO, generative engine optimization, or whatever, we haven't got a term for it, to show up in ChatGPT, the current guidance is make sure you are on Bing search tools as well, Webmaster Tools, because that's where they're putting information because of that Microsoft partnership. That is apparently changing, and people have noticed that Google Webmaster is becoming more and more important. That is anecdotal, though. What they'll be doing for sure is pulling information from business listings. So on both Bing and on Google, like Google Maps, for example, you can list information about your business and you follow a certain schema in order to provide that information. That's where they'll be pulling the information from. So unless they set up their own service that allows you to upload that information, I imagine they'll continue to use Bing Webmaster and Google Webmaster or Search Console, whatever it's called now, in the intermediate term. They are talking about moving into browsers. Maybe they'll start to lay down other kind of web infrastructure, other ways for people to upload information, but I don't know. What they do need, though, and what all AI companies need, is more data. So any tools allow them to get more structured data is going to be very valuable for them. So this is probably a good idea for them, a way for businesses to provide information that goes into ChatGPT and to update that information, more importantly. Jack is saying, I can't comprehend the societal change once AGI is achieved. Struggle to imagine it going well. Yeah, almost by definition, we as humans, well, by definition, it's impossible for us to imagine artificial superintelligence. It's like a chicken trying to comprehend what us humans are doing. Like they'll look up at us, they're scratching around in the dirt, eating millet or whatever, and they'll look up at humans and be like, oh, what are they doing? Oh, no use to be worrying about that. When we get to, or if we get to artificial superintelligence, we'll be at a similar point like that, where we, by definition, cannot comprehend. We're not intelligent enough to understand what's going on there. With AGI, artificial general intelligence, it depends how we define it, obviously, because we're still struggling for a proper definition and we keep moving the goalposts back. What we would have considered AGI 20 years ago, we've achieved like way. So we just keep pushing it back and saying, oh no, if a computer can do that, then it's not actually AGI. But you're right, it's very hard to comprehend or to understand what that's going to look like. And this is the main challenge that humanity needs to face right now. There are arguments for slowing down, but the problem with slowing down is it needs to be unilateral. So if you as an individual slow down, the other people around you are not slowing down. So you're going to get left behind. If you as a company slow down, then your competitors will not slow down and you're going to go out of business. If you as a country slow down, or as a bloc like the EU right now slow down, you're going to get left behind, as the EU already has. So what we need is everybody to make that unilateral decision to do it at the same time. And the two big players are China and America. America are not going to slow down because they know China will not, and vice versa. China are not going to slow down because they know America will not. So these two are locked in a struggle. Basically, it's a new arms race. And there is no way either of them is going to blink and slow down unless they both do it at the same time. So the only way we could do this is like a nuclear disarmament program, where we have some kind of unilateral decision where the whole of humanity decides to do something worthwhile altogether. Historically, we haven't been very good at that. Nuclear disarmament is probably the only one, but how many nukes are there on Earth? It's still a lot, because we can't even get together and work out climate change. There are 12,500 nuclear weapons in the world. with 90% held by the US and Russia, apparently. So I don't think humans are very good at working unilaterally on a problem. We have bodies like the UN who can issue proclamations and edicts, but those kind of structures are not fast enough to deal with a technology like artificial intelligence. So my pragmatic, realistic way of thinking about this is we need to keep on top of it. So we can't just say, oh, slow it down, I hate it, it's bad. That's not going to be sufficient because this is happening. If you want Pandora's box has been opened, it is happening at speed. So we need to be ready for whatever that means. So my small part of this is helping normal people try and comprehend this, but we do need to have, I wouldn't say regulations, but we need to have rules and structures for how we are going to govern this moving forward. It's a big deal. I agree with the Pope on this. The new Pope, he said that one of the largest thing we need to deal with right now is AI. Yeah, I agree with the Pope, apparently. Somebody just mentioned UBI. UBI or civil unrest, lots of displaced people. So UBI, Universal Basic Income, it's one of the solutions being touted for if/when jobs decrease because of artificial intelligence. Then there's this question of, okay, how are we going to live? And UBI, the structure. So UBI makes sense within a capitalist system. We may or may not have capitalism as we know it once we have AGI or decades down the line. 100 years from now, it's going to look very different. The question is, what are the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years going to look like? So there's going to be this messy middle until we get to something that I hope is a positive equilibrium. But there's going to be mess, at least early on. And UBI is one of these ways that we can soften the blow, make sure that everybody has enough to live on, everyone can live a life, even if they are not working or even if they're working much less. Again, I was at this panel the other day and somebody was talking about their optimistic viewpoints, and they were saying that in the next 10 years or so, then the governments will get their shit together basically and sort out UBI and it's going to be okay. And I was sitting there, I don't guard my face very well, so I'm sure I was sitting there like pulling a face. I just don't think our governments have, I won't speak for all governments, but most governments do not have their crap together enough to be able to provide this in a meaningful way. So I just do not have hope that is going to be a solution that the current governments are going to be able to provide. They're too selfish, basically. I think it's a potential solution. There are a lot of complications to it, but it should be something that is being discussed. It is not being discussed at high levels of government. So I think the fact that it's not even being talked about or thought about yet is a bit worrying because we need to get on with working out a solution. But most governments will just bury their head in the sand, unfortunately. As Perry is saying, civil unrest, yeah, there's going to be some of that. There is going to be some of that. Ooh, Baron Corvo, what are the implications for news media? Is AI likely to further erode motivation to provide good quality journalism? Yeah, it will, unfortunately. It's the same with all content and all output and all creation. There's always going to be a market for quality. So we have, what's in America? The investigative newspaper. I've forgotten the name of it. Not the Boston Globe. Oh, the Washington Post, which is a high-level, investigative, hard-hitting, impactful journalism. There's always going to be a small market for that, but it's going to be a small market. The majority of content, and this is already happening with our news organizations today, the majority of content is just to get attention, which means when you go to a website like the Daily Mail or CNN or whatever, a lot of it is clickbait. You see it on the BBC as well. Like the BBC should be this shining star of quality journalism. No, a load of it's clickbait. If I go there right now, let's see what the first clickbaity one. A hospital gave us 2 death certificates for dad to cover up for the mistake. Something about cyber flashing. Okay, it's not too bad today. But a lot of the time, it will just be whatever can grab attention, not necessarily what's of the most journalistic importance. That's already happening because journalism as an industry, not as a practice, but as an industry, it has supply and demand. It's a business, basically. And most demand comes from not hard-hitting, investigative, important journalism, but from what drives clicks. And unfortunately, the majority of people out there want stuff that's entertaining and sensational. So AI can help provide that, and that will just further push us down that particular hole. There will always be a space for the proper journalism. It's just going to become more and more niche. It's going to become more of a luxury. I was talking about this yesterday in terms of content. I think the same with content. AI is going to produce a huge amount of video and text, etc. There will be a small kind of luxury market for human crafted, but that will become smaller and smaller and smaller because the majority of people do not care. They just want something that they can scroll through, something that they can click through and be shocked, entertained, made angry, or whatever it is. AI will just push us further in that direction towards our basest instincts, while a small percentage will focus on what is valuable. That is just going to get smaller and smaller. Sorry to be pessimistic on that, but yes, I think it will erode quality journalism. This one wasn't really news, but I thought it was very interesting. So it's to do with education. I saw this really good tweet where one person said, writing is not a second thing that happens after thinking. The act of writing is an act of thinking. Writing is thinking. This is really important in the world of AI, especially in education. So the follow-up tweet was, this is a central problem with higher education in the age of AI. We cannot require students to do take-home writing assignments, e.g. term papers, anymore because most will cheat and have ChatGPT or Claude or Grok do the writing. But we can't teach critical thinking, rationality, perseverance, and scholarship without requiring writing assignments you work on, researching, drafting, editing, revising, polishing over a period of days or weeks. The result may be a whole generation of students who can't really write or think or articulate what they really believe and value and why. I think this hits the nail on the head on the difference between using AI to be efficient and using AI to be lazy. So you can do both of it. I think people who are older, like myself, we are in a very lucky position. And if you are my age or older, we're in a great position where we learned to think and write the manual way. And now we can take advantage of AI tools to leverage that learning that we've done. Because writing itself, when you write, it's not purely about the output. Like I could generate a PhD thesis. It probably wouldn't be very good, but I could probably generate a PhD thesis in a few weeks using artificial intelligence. The important thing is not the writing at the end. The important thing is me going through the process of putting that together, which is why it takes years generally to do a PhD. And even easier if I'm doing a master's or a bachelor's thesis. That would be fairly trivial nowadays. But that means that I have robbed myself as learning because the act of writing, which again is researching, drafting, editing, revising, polishing, all of that, doing the process of this, that is thinking. This is why my newsletter, when I realized what was happening with AI, I was running a digital marketing agency at the time, and I realized like, oh, this is going to be a problem. AI is going to be an issue. I started to learn as much as I could about artificial intelligence. And the way that I personally learn is by writing. So I started writing the newsletter. I was writing about 1,000 words a day about AI and the use of AI in business. Because by doing that, you are practicing going through problems. You are solving problems. You are working things out in your brain, which then allows you to talk about them. It allows you to write about them with some degree of authority, maybe. But that is robbed from us if we just use ChatGPT or Claude or maybe Grok to put together the piece of writing ourselves. It's cliched, but it's the journey that matters, not the destination in education in particular. So I personally went to Oxford. I studied history. They would have us write 1 or 2 essays every single day. So we just wrote and wrote every day, every week. It wasn't that bad. So I'd write maybe 6,000 words every single week for 3 years. That's just what you did, right? That experience of writing and thinking and being critical, that is what's going to be stolen away by artificial intelligence for the next set of students coming through. It's tricky though, because when you have such a powerful tool at your disposal, it's really hard to resist using it. Even if somebody like me is saying, no, you're robbing yourself, blah, 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 do the hard work for 3 years. I mean, if I was 18 again and somebody told me to do the hard work for 3 years, or I could use this tool and go out partying instead, it's quite an easy choice to make. So I think AI is an amazing tool for those of us who have learned to think, we've learned to be critical, we've learned to be discerning, and now we can use AI to leverage those skills. But if you are going into university and going into higher education right now, it could be devastating depending on how you use it. AI It can make the lazy very lazy, and it can make the efficient extremely efficient. It's just how we choose to balance that out, which is difficult. It's another very, not intractable, but it's a difficult problem to solve. But I thought this tweet here just summed it up. We cannot teach critical thinking, rationality, perseverance, and scholarship without requiring writing assignments that they work on, researching, drafting, editing, revising, polishing over a period of days or weeks. So important. And I think that hits the nail on the head on why AI is extremely problematic in education and why we need to work out what we're doing with it. Because it's not going away. Interesting. Zoppy Bloom says, I've just got off a call with my supervisor. Is this PhD or master's? Awesome, by the way. And I totally agree. The words we use matter. So yeah, it's the process of working with your supervisor, thinking, hitting roadblocks, working your way through those roadblocks, reading new pieces of information, synthesizing it in. It's all of that work in the background. That's where we're actually learning. It's not just producing the Word document or whatever it is, because we can now do that like in seconds. So we rob ourselves of that process if we don't do it the hard manual way, which I understand it's hard and manual, and that's unattractive. I'd be fascinated to hear what your supervisor thinks, so Zoppy Bloom, because imagine if you're in education, if you work as a supervisor, if you work as a tutor, this is something that they're having to deal with on a daily basis. Okay, AI is here. What do we do? Do we just ban it? Or do we promote it, but give people ways to use it properly? But what if we don't ourselves know how to use it properly, etc.? There's a huge amount that needs to be unpacked here. It needs to be done fast. Otherwise, we're going to have generations of people who haven't learned. They've just taken the questions they've been asked, put them into ChatGPT, output an answer, and hand that in. It just passes through them, and without any friction, nothing's going to stick. Oh, Zoppy Bloom is saying, I'm a teacher and studying a master's in cyber. Okay, cool. Cybersecurity. We have a massive problem at level 3. Yeah. Yes, with coding as well. It's going to be an issue when people are doing coding assignments, because in the real world, they will probably be using AI assistants, but we need to go through the process of writing that code, at least initially handwriting that code, so it becomes ingrained in the muscle memory, because otherwise we are just using the autocompletes. We can have the code written for us completely by Claude Code using natural language, but then we are not learning the syntax. We're not learning the structure, the architecture of programs themselves. We are just, again, given the problem to the AI to solve, so we don't do any of the solving ourselves. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Wizard is saying, what's the news today? Great question. I've gone through most of it already because I've been going for about an hour. So if you want to do a catch up, everything is going to be on YouTube. My YouTube channel is relatively new. It's only got 2,500 subscribers, and building up on YouTube is an absolute grind. It's really taken a long time. I've been told apparently that's normal, so that's fine. You can find all of the prior videos over on YouTube. What we do is we take these lives, we cut them up, and we make them into individual segments. So if I was talking about education, for example, there'll be a separate video on education, which means you don't need to dig your way through the entire live. There is also a newsletter, which comes out every single day at 8 a.m. London time, which has a summary of the last live, and again with the time codes and timestamps to go to the specific information. You've missed the news for today, but you can catch up easily using the newsletter and the YouTube. But the main things were, what did we have? We had Gemini. It's also passed and got a gold medal in the International Math Olympiad. There was news about Mustafa Suleyman knew that Google were going to be in trouble if they released Lambda, which it was ChatGPT before ChatGPT. Then I've just been talking about education and the need for friction in order to be able to learn. I've also been answering a lot of questions because we've had lots today. Yeah, Larissa is saying the real social media grind happens on YouTube. Yes, I feel you, Larissa. So for me, TikTok, I grew to 120, 140, whatever I am now on TikTok in about a year. And so TikTok goes slowly, then boom, it ramps up, and then you hit a plateau and slow down. So I'm in groups of other creators, and that tends to be the pattern. Instagram is a lot slower, and YouTube is the slowest. YouTube is basically flat until you have proven to YouTube that you are going to continuously put out content, and then they start to spike you up a bit, get you the first few thousand, and then apparently it goes back into a grind. So I'm in the grind between 1,000 and 10,000. And I've heard from big YouTubers, I was talking to Ali Abdal's YouTube guy, he was saying once you hit 10,000, Google basically are like, okay, we're going to give you a shot, and they start to put you on the front pages, and then hopefully you can get to 100,000 from there. But I'm in it for the long haul now. But this is all you can do on social media. You just need to keep turning up and doing it, and it's very boring. And we tend to see people in social media and think, oh, it looks easy for them. No, it's not. It's you have to do a lot of work to get there. So if you are thinking about creating content, don't expect fast returns, but know that when you put in the work, then you will get a point where there's inflection, and the algorithms and the audiences and stuff will start to reward you. Also, just by putting in the work and putting out a lot of volume, putting out a lot of content, you yourself get better. So I'm very much a firm believer in quantity leads to quality, because you're just practicing, you're getting your repetitions in. I am going to hop off. Thank you everyone for your questions, and I will be, just being told you have to do a capture on TikTok Live every hour that you are on. Otherwise, it assumes you are off. So it just brings up on your screen, I just had a dog that I had to do a capture on. I'm going to hop off. Again, newsletter is free, link in the bio, and YouTube has all the clips from the live. And I will be back tomorrow morning with the new updates from the world of AI. Thank you.